After losing week one in a very non-competitive fashion, my Carolina Panthers are geared up to face the New Orleans Saints in week two in yet another division rivalry game to start the season. So in this video, we're going to go over 4 questions that I believe will be answered throughout the duration of this game, a few key matchups, and I'll finally give you my predictions for how this game is going to work out. And we're going to get into all of that right after this.
I'm from the foe. You dig?
Welcome to The Way I See It with Jamario Rashad. This is a Carolina Panthers fan channel. Please do me a favor by hitting the like button and please make sure you subscribe as I am on my road to 3K, trying to make sure my channel continues to grow as this season plays out. Now that that's out of the way, let's go ahead and get to this week 2 breakdown. Panthers versus Saints, the home opener of the year. So as far as these questions that I believe will be answered, the first thing that everybody is just so anxious to learn is how will Bryce Young respond after having a less than stellar NFL debut, throwing 2 interceptions for less than 150 yards, but he did have a touchdown. But what many would point to as what is very un-Bryce Young-like was the fact that he made the same mistake twice, throwing an interception to Jessie Bates in the middle of the field without even seeing him there playing in that zone coverage where Bates basically didn't move his feet the entire play, man. So how exactly will Bryce Young, the first overall pick, former Heisman winner, how will he respond after having a down first game, losing his first game in the NFL after not losing very many games at all throughout his duration at Alabama? Everybody's very anxious to see how this is going to play out. I myself am also very anxious, and I believe that is what most people are going to have their eyes on, man. But the second question that I believe is most definitely going to be answered during this game or throughout this game is, can the corners hold or cover for long enough? If you are not aware, starting star cornerback Jaycee Horn went down with an injury last week in the first game of the season, and he will be out until at least week 5 on injury reserve with a hamstring injury. With that being the case, that thrust back up Panthers cornerback C.J. Henderson into the starting lineup, as he was the one that played in that role and in that capacity last year. Whenever Donte Jackson or Jaycee Horn went down, C.J. Henderson was the one to step up. So I believe he will be the one that gets that job this upcoming week, man. So with that being the case, he and Donte Jackson and C.J. Henderson are going to be backed up by newly added players in Troy Hill, who was a veteran, and also Deshaun Jameson, who was just activated off the practice squad. So we don't have very much depth whatsoever, but if these guys are able to hold for any decent amount of time, that will provide the defensive line with the time it takes to create some type of effective and consistent pass rush. Unlike in the game that we went against last week with the Atlanta Falcons, where they were a run-first team with the likes of Algier and Bijon Robinson, the Saints with Derek Carr, Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, they are going to want to put the ball in the air a little bit more often, throw the ball around a lot, and test these DBs. So we most definitely are going to see whether or not our guys are up to the challenge. But if they can hold for any adequate amount of time, I believe that gives Brian Burns, Justin Houston, who we didn't see much of last week, and Amari Barno, who we didn't see any of at all. I believe that allows those guys to get into a rhythm of getting back into the backfield and creating a consistent pass rush, which will get this defense off the field a lot quicker, not having to be out there in many passing situations where, they could potentially get burned, man. So the next question that I believe will most certainly be answered is, will the dominance, and I mean the dominance, of Brian Burns continue and spill over from last week's game into this week's game? Now, Brian Burns was an absolute monster out of the gate last week, getting a strip sack to end the very first drive for the defense of the entire season, having what should have been 3 sacks over the game, finishing with 7 total tackles, and was just wrecking shop from the moment the ball was snapped. Brian Burns, if he can continue to do what he was able to do, most certainly will command double teams. And if he, as I said on the same point with the cornerbacks, if he is able to be the catalyst of a consistent pass rush, that means that our cornerback, that our DB room that is like significantly depleted with the loss of Jaycee Horn right now, does not have to cover as long as they would have if we weren't actually able to get to Derek Carr on a consistent basis. So if Brian Burns continues to be dominant, that is going to force them to funnel the double team over to his side of the field, which would allow Justin Houston to not see many see like majority one-on-one situations throughout the entirety of the game, as well as Amari Barno when switched in. So Brian Burns, if he can continue to play as well as he has, or as well as he did in the first game of the season, that will allow for my Carolina Panthers defense overall to just get going and have this defensive unit to hold steady and not have to be a heavy like coverage team if we can just simply consistently create a pass rush. So that's what I want to focus in on. I do not want to allow this to be a game that is decided through the air, man. Let's stop that, and let's stop it fast. So finally, that brings me to my last question that I believe will most certainly, hold on, there I am. My picture, my camera wasn't turned on. This question will most certainly be answered just as I wanted to know how will Bryce Young respond to his first game. I believe more importantly, a more important question to ask is how exactly will Frank Reich and Thomas Brown respond to the outcome that we got in the first game last week against the Atlanta Falcons. In my opinion, I'm not sure how many other people feel this way, but I definitely saw it this way. After that first drive ended on 4th down, where we unfortunately ended on a turnover of downs, it felt as though Frank Reich might have panicked just a little bit. My reason for saying that, and my main example is Laviska Shenault was like very, very featured in that first drive. He had 3 touches, 16 yards, as well as he picked up a 3rd and long, which moved the change, which kept the offense on the field. He was a very key piece in that first offensive drive that actually got us down the field in field goal range and potentially put us in position to score a touchdown. After that, Laviska Shenault only got 1 more touch. It seems as though like we went away from the run game. Miles Sanders and Chuba Hubbard saw the ball a lot on that first drive as well. But by the end of the game, Bryce Young had thrown the ball 38 times in his very first NFL game, which I refuse to believe was the game plan coming into today, with the infusion of the new scheme and the new formations, with Laviska Shenault being a do-it-all weapon, with the addition of Miles Sanders in the offseason, with Chuba Hubbard looking like he's progressed in his 3rd year. I find it hard to believe that the goal or the game plan for last week was for Bryce Young to come in and throw the ball nearly 40 times. I believe that was more so indicative of our head coach and our offensive coordinator getting away from their original game plan, which is why I think things got a little bit rocky. They decided to put the ball in the air in obvious situations where we should have been running it. There were times where, yes, we were backed up on our own negative side of the ball, but even with that being the case, run the ball, live to fight another drive. The other team was not putting up that much resistance or that many points anyway. So why in the world would you not just continue to run the ball? So we will most certainly see if these guys will stick to the game plan, take a little bit of that pressure that they allowed to be on the shoulders of Bryce Young unnecessarily, in my opinion. We'll see if they'll be able to take that off this week, stick to the game plan, or just create a game plan that isn't so Bryce Young heavy moving into this game with the New Orleans Saints. And I believe that will be a good indication of how this staff will be able to operate throughout the duration of the rest of the season, man. So those are 4 questions that I believe will most certainly be answered in this game. I apologize if you hear my dog in the background, my little puppy. He's upset. I'm recording this video. He's in the playpen. He's very upset with me. But if I look over, I'm hearing my dog. But now let's move into the key matchups, both on the offensive side of the ball and the defensive side of the ball. Those that I think will be the deciding factors and that can change the outcome depending on which way that these matchups unfold. First, starting with the offense, we are going to say, or I am going to say, that the most important key matchup after watching the film last week on my Carolina Panthers is going to be DJ Chark versus Marshon Lattimore. Now, DJ Chark did not play last week. He was coming off a hamstring injury that hampered him throughout the later stages of the preseason. That actually, of course, kept him out last week, as I mentioned. So this will be his first game action, but more so than what we will just get or what we can anticipate in terms of what DJ Chark will bring to the stat sheet or to the box score, just the infusion of him and his skill set, most specifically his speed and downfield ability, is what is going to make the most difference for this Carolina Panthers offense. Last week, this team had absolutely nobody that was a deep threat that could get over top, that would force the Atlanta Falcons to put a safety high or play too high and cover over top to make sure that we didn't have any deep passes. We didn't have any receivers that could create separation and actually make those plays out there on the field. So that allowed for the likes of safety Jessie Bates to just sit in the middle of the field, watch Bryce Young read his eyes, get two interceptions on a rookie quarterback because there was no threat of that over top route or that of the long ball, that it just wasn't there all game. Why do I bring that up? I bring that up because Tyrann Mathieu is a former All-Pro, former Pro Bowl safety that is still very good in his own right for the New Orleans Saints, that I'm pretty sure watched that film last week and saw how Jessie Bates was able to manipulate the lacking of a downfield receiver for my Carolina Panthers. If he is smart, I know that Tyrann Mathieu is probably planning on doing those same things. With the infusion of DJ Chark and that speed, that won't allow Tyrann Mathieu to be able to just sit in the field like Jessie Bates did last week. So what else does that open up? What did we learn last week? Hayden Hurst is somebody that I believe Bryce Young has learned that he can depend on, somebody that he wants to go to consistently, and pretty much he is his favorite target right now. What we need to do to make sure that Hayden Hurst can consistently get open is make sure that a safety can't just sit in the middle of the field and just play over top and jump his routes whenever he gets the ball thrown to him. DJ Chark is the reason that won't be able to happen, and that is the main reason why I'm choosing to feature him in the offensive side of the ball in terms of the key matchups this week, and deem it to be my most important in my opinion. But just to give a little background into Marshon Lattimore, in 2022, Marshon Lattimore only allowed for a passer rating of 67.3, 228 yards, and he allowed no touchdowns, but he only played and appeared in 7 games. And so over the last season, he has played in 7 games last season, as well as the home opener last week. So he is still getting his footing back, still working his way back into the rotation, but he is good as he's always been, and this is going to be a key matchup that could play the greatest determining factor, or have the greatest amount of the win or loss, the greatest amount of the percentage in the pie chart or whatever. Y'all know what I'm trying to say. Moving on. Next, we have one that if you have not been watching closely, you may not know that this is going on, but this is highly, highly important, as we saw that the bad offensive line play that was showcased during the preseason, during the first and second, and even sometimes even at some points during the third game of the preseason, those issues weren't really present during last week's game against the Atlanta Falcons. Bryce Young was not pressured very much at all. There was not a sack he did not get sacked into the end of the game when there were obvious passing situations where the offensive line was just forced to pass protect play after play after play. Some things broke down, but throughout the duration of the game, he was kept pretty clean. The passing lanes were there, but that was with the addition of rookie Chandler Zavala playing right guard in his first game ever and just being an absolute stud against Grady Jarrett. Now, many people speculated after we heard the unfortunate news the other day that Brady Christensen, who was our starting left guard in our Atlanta game last week, as well as all of last year, is going to be out for the season, not even IR, for the season with a bicep injury. So we anticipated that Zavala would naturally be moved over to his perceived natural position at left guard and play alongside former college teammate Ike Ekwonu on the left side of this offensive line. According to the team, that's not going to happen. They liked what Zavala was able to do at right guard, and they don't want to mess with continuity. So they are going to play undrafted rookie Nash Jensen from North Dakota State at that left guard position. So he is going to be in charge of blocking not only interior defensive tackle Nathan Shepard, but also former All-Pro, former Pro Bowl, future Hall of Famer in Cam Jordan. You can only imagine that the defensive coordinator is going to run some type of stunts, forcing Cam Jordan to be the one that actually loops inside and be against this undrafted rookie and put him in some very unfortunate and uncomfortable situations. Because why wouldn't you? That's just the right thing to do. You attack the perceived weak link. So Nash Jensen will somewhat solely be responsible for keeping up the continuity of this offensive line that we saw established last week with their excellent play throughout the game. So this will be a key matchup that if one will pay a great deal towards us winning this game, but if we struggle in this spot, the offense will most certainly probably lack again, even more so than we saw last week, if Bryce Young doesn't even have time to throw and the wide receivers potentially aren't getting separation. That could spell disaster for my Carolina Panthers, and that is why that is our second most important offensive key matchup of the week. Now we move to the other side of the ball, the defense. Who are the defensive key matchups? Well, of course, excuse me. I know some people are already shaking their heads, upset, like, bro, what the actual is going on? Like, I'm sorry, y'all. This is just what it is. These are the circumstances. I wouldn't have it this way if I had it my way, but it is what it is, man. C.J. Henderson versus star second-year wide receiver Chris Olave. Now, of course, C.J. Henderson is starting because of the injury to Jaycee Horn. Excuse me. I'm sorry, y'all. I have a cold. Because of the injury to Jaycee Horn, and I'm not even going to give any background information into his numbers. I'm not going to give the, passer rating, allow this many yards. None of that. Anybody that has paid any attention to Carolina Panthers football over the last 2 years knows that C.J. Henderson has damn near been some hot garbage, but he is going to be thrusted into the starting lineup. Now, why wouldn't this be Donte Jackson? Why wouldn't you move the secondary guy over to play the primary guy when your first guy goes down? The only reason I'm making this decision is looking back on the decisions that defensive coordinator Evero made with his DBs last year, most specifically his cornerbacks. There was no situation whatsoever where they flipped sides of the field. Pat Surtain stayed on his side of the field most of the time, only the boundary, and the only time he came inside, he never guarded slot receivers, and the only time you would see him close to the line of scrimmage, or even close to the slot was if he was guarding a star receiver, the likes of a Travis Kelce. So I don't think that his philosophy for his defense will change very much at all. So I believe that Michael Thomas will be on the boundary against or lined up against Donte Jackson. So that leaves, unfortunately, and on our behalf, C.J. Henderson against Chris Olave. But just to give you a little insight into you know, how Olave has been able to do in his short career. He had over 1,000 yards as a rookie, and so far in the season opener last week, he had 8 catches for 112 yards. And I don't know, man. This one is going to be tough. This one is going to be a rough one. In my head, there's no way, absolutely no way that Ejiro Evero allows this to be one-on-one for more than hopefully 15 to 20% of the possessions. That he needs to have help. He needs to have safety help almost each and every play. We cannot afford for CJ Burnt Toast Henderson to be the reason why we lose this game. But this is going to be a key matchup to watch because we could get our asses burnt right here and get blown out because of CJ Henderson. But if he shocks us and have a good game, that will make this game a hell of a lot more competitive. Now, finally, our last key matchup of the game, that bad man Brian Burns against left tackle Trevor Penning. Now, I'm not going to go over again just how dominant Brian Burns was in the season opener last week against the Atlanta Falcons, but just know he absolutely wrecked shop, and there is no signs of him slowing down whatsoever. He's playing with raw emotion because he has not received the contract extension that he desires, and he still hasn't received it this week, even after playing as good as he did last week. So one can only imagine that he's even more pissed off, i.e., he's even more motivated. So Trevor Penning is a second-year first-round pick, but this is only going to be his 8th game in the NFL. So this is going to be a true task of a unproven, young, highly touted, highly sought-after potential guy in Trevor Penning, as I mentioned, being a first-round pick, going against an absolute dog in Brian Burns. This matchup right here could be the game that changes everything. As I mentioned, we have to have C.J. Henderson covering the likes of Chris Olave. We don't even want for Donte Jackson to have to line up one-on-one with an older, broken down Michael Thomas too much, because we know that our DBs tend to struggle if they have to cover for too long, just like, even the good DBs do. So if Brian Burns can wreck shop against Trevor Penning, that is going to force the offense to make adjustments, to send double teams his way, taking bodies away from the opposite side of the line, opening up holes and opening up one-on-one opportunities for Justin Houston, who we didn't see much of last week, as I mentioned, and Amari Barno, who didn't see the field at all. These guys are going to air out the ball a lot more, giving those other guys opportunities. So if Brian Burns is able to control this matchup, similar to how we saw Jeffrey Simmons just dominate last week against this guy, I believe my Carolina Panthers stand a very, very great chance of winning this game. And this is the 4th and final matchup that I believe will be key to the outcome of this game in week 2. So now I've said my piece. I've broken it down. I've let you know everything that I think about this game in terms or from the perspective of my Carolina Panthers. So what is my prediction? I think this is going to turn out 17-14. Good guys get the victory. I think the Carolina Panthers are set up to have a bounce back game, to just be spectacular, learn from their mistakes, and I don't think that it is going to be an offensive explosion. I don't think that there are just going to be moves that are made or tweaks here or there that are going to allow us to just all of a sudden become the Kansas City Chiefs. But I believe that the offense will consistently be able to move the ball more often. I don't think it will be a high-scoring game whatsoever. I believe Bryce Young will bounce back. Still won't have 200 yards, but I believe he will end with right around 185 yards, 1 passing touchdown, and no interceptions. I believe this will be a game that after last week, after seeing what happened after the game plan fell apart after the first drive, I believe that we will lean on our running backs this week. The combination of Miles Sanders and Chuba Hubbard, I expect them to run for at least 140 yards and at least 1 touchdown between the two of them, finishing that off with just an Eddie Pinheiro field goal, putting us up by 3 points, and ending the game and getting Bryce Young his very first victory in the NFL, man. But that is my breakdown for the week, man. What do you all think about all this that was said, about this video, about the questions that need to be answered? Who do you all think should be the key matchups if you don't agree with mine? Whatever you all think about this upcoming game, it's about time we start talking about it. Stop talking about last week. It's time to start talking about primetime Monday night game, man. So whatever you all think, leave your comments down in the comment section, and I'll be sure to chop it up with you when I get to it, man. But until next time, I am Jamario Rashad. This is the way I see it, and I'm out. Peace.